Welcome to Bourbon and BS, the podcast where I dive deep into the world of spirits one shot at a time. I'm Mike Fody, founder and director of the Bison Bourbon and Spirits Training Company, where my goal is to help you master spirits to guide your future whiskey choices. Today I'm calling this podcast The Origin Story. It's about wood, forests, and cooperages. The big idea is to really understand cask management. Cask management is an agricultural and biological process long before it becomes a distilling need. This podcast contains the idea that every cask is a variable, not a commodity. I first learned about this from Matt Strickland during his program on this topic at the Moonshine University. Distillers choose species based on desired extraction speed, the texture of the final product, aromatic direction, not novelty alone. So first I'll talk about the different species and why oak is not just oak. There are many different species that can be used. American white oak versus European oak versus Limousin oak and some other exotic species. And how the lignin, hemicellulose, and tannin compositions differ and why that matters for the whiskey flavor. Different oak species bring fundamentally different chemical architecture into the barrel, and those differences directly shape how the whiskey matures. Extraction speed from wood into whiskey is driven by a cluster of wood intrinsic factors: the chemistry, the structure, physical condition of the oak itself, before you even get to the warehouse variables. The fastest way to think about it is anything that increases surface area, permeability, or the availability of extractives accelerates transfer. Anything that tightens structure or reduces soluble compounds slows extraction down. American white oak, also called Quercus alba, is rich in cis and trans oak lactones, which produce coconut, vanilla, and sweet wood aromas, and it contains relatively low levels of hydrolyzable tannins. Its lignin structure favors the formation of vanillin or vanilla and syringaldehyde during the toasting process, making it ideal for bold, early extracting spirits like bourbon. Lower tannins, higher tyloses, higher oak lactone precursors all affect the spirit. Faster extraction of sweet aromatics like vanillin, coconut, and caramel, because lignin breaks down into more syringal guaiacol compounds under heat. Tight tyloses slow liquid penetration but increase surface extraction. Whereas with European oaks, which are also called Quercus robur and Quercus petrii, contain higher tannin concentrations and different lignin ratios, producing more spicy, dry, and having more structural grip. Qualities prized in long-aged whiskeys and sherry-seasoned casks. Higher tannin, more porous, more egalitannins. They all affect the final product. They cause faster extraction of tannins and spice compounds, which results in deeper penetration of the spirit into the staves. Exotic species such as Mizunara or chestnut introduce entirely different lignin and tannin profiles, often yielding incense, sandalwood, and resinous notes, but with higher risk of imbalance. Mizunara, which is also Quercus mongolica, is very porous, has low tyloses, and high lactone potential. It's extremely fast extraction, but also high evaporation and poor structural integrity. So again, why it matters: the species determines what is available to extract and how quickly those compounds dissolve into ethanol and water, resulting in the final whiskey that we're looking for. Next chapter in this whole wood story is the growth environment and forest management. The environment in which an oak tree grows determines how it behaves later as a cask. Soil, climate, and forest management practices influence the density of the pores, the grain tightness, and extractive potential. Soil composition influences mineral uptake and growth rate. Climate and rainfall affect ring width and grain tightness. Slow-grown oak from cooler climates tend to have a tighter grain, which slows the extraction and promotes long controlled maturation. Faster grown oak from warmer and nutrient rich environments often yields wider grain, increasing extractive potential, but also the risk of over oaking. Forest management practices such as spacing, thinning, and harvest age further influence density and uniformity. Growers who manage forests for cooperages prioritize straight trunks, consistent grain, and long maturation cycles, effectively shaping the future flavor potential of the spirit before the tree is even cut. Where cooperage oak is grown plays a critical role. The oak used for whiskey casks come from a few key regions, each with its own ecological pressures and flavor consequences. The industry's long-term supply depends on forestry management, replanting, and conservation programs, and it also drives the flavor differences between oak species, which comes down to chemistry, lignin, hemicellulose, tannins, and lactones, which vary by species and growth environment. 3 major oak species dominate whiskey cask production, and each is tied to specific geographies. American white oak grows across the eastern half of the United States, with major cooperage grade forests in Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, Ohio, and Arkansas. They are the backbone of the bourbon industry. It's because U.S. law requires new charred white oak. White oak forest covers more than 100 million U.S. acres, though most stands are mature and regeneration is lagging. European oak, Quercus robur, is found in France, and it's sometimes called Limousin oak or Tronqué oak. It also grows in Spain, Portugal, and parts of Eastern Europe. These are the primary woods for sherry butts, wine casks, and many Scotch whiskey finishing casks. Spanish oak, used in some sherry cooperages in Jerez, Spain, especially for seasoning casks destined for whiskey finishing. These forests grow slowly, often 80 to 100 years before a tree is ready for cooperage, so long-term planning is critical. Demand for oak barrels is rising, while natural regeneration, especially of American white oak, is declining. Several strategies are now in place. Some of those strategies include the White Oak Initiative, which is a coalition of researchers, government agencies, and industry partners working to restore white oak regeneration across the United States. They warn that although current supply is stable, the next few decades could see rapid decline without intervention. Sustainable forestry certification also occurs. It's another program, and many cooperages now source from forests where trees are replanted and ecosystems are preserved. This ensures future availability while maintaining biodiversity. Longer-term forest management is also a process. There's controlled burn, selective thinning, and habitat restoration helping the white oak seedlings compete with faster-growing species. Barrel reuse and repurposing is another strategy. Bourbon barrels get a second life in Scotch, Irish whiskey, rum, tequila, beer, and wine industries. This reduces pressure on new oak harvesting and extends each tree's usable lifespan. Diversifying oak species actually helps as well. Some distillers experiment with non-traditional species or hybrid oaks to reduce the reliance on a single species of white oak. So now we'll talk a little bit about the grain, the density, and the porosity. Grain, the spacing of annual growth rings is critical. A tight grain, which indicates slow growth, has higher density, more uniform structure, and slower extraction, but more controlled release of tannins and lactones. Wide grain, which is associated with fast growth, is more porous, faster extraction, more aggressive tannin pickup early in the maturation process. So the impact, tight grain equals elegance and slow layering, wide grain equals bold, fast, and sometimes coarse extraction. Density determines how easily the spirit penetrates the cell structure in the wood. High density means slower penetration, slower extraction, and more surface-driven chemistry. Low density is associated with faster penetration, faster extraction of tannins and hemicellulose breakdown products. Porosity is especially important for European oak and Mizunara oak, where spirit moves deep into the stave, increasing extraction speed. Seasoning and stave preparation is critical to the maturation of whiskey. Seasonal changes change the chemical composition of wood before the barrel is even built. Long natural seasoning, which is 18 to 36 months, reduces harsh egalitannins, increases aromatic pressures, and breaks down hemicellulose. Faster extraction of pleasant compounds, slower extraction of bitterness. Short seasoning results, or even kiln drying, leaves more raw tannins intact. This causes faster extraction of bitterness, slower development of sweet aromas. Microbial activity during seasoning also produces precursors for vanillin and spice compounds. Seasoning is where raw wood begins its transformation into a maturation tool. In his book, Matt Strickland highlights the importance of air drying staves over multiple years, allowing rain, sunlight, and microbial activity to break down harsh tannins while increasing aromatic precursors. Seasoning is one of the most critical yet least visible signs of cask production. Kiln drying, while faster, can lock in bitterness and reduce complexity if not carefully managed. Kiln drying removes moisture quickly, but limits the biochemical transformation, often preserving harsher tannins. Seasoning is not simply moisture removal. It's a biochemical process that determines whether a cask will enhance or dominate a spirit. In natural seasoning, staves are stacked outdoor for years, exposed to rain, sunlight, and microbial activity. During this time, harsh egalitannins leach out, lignin begins to oxidize, and fungi and bacteria metabolize bitter compounds while increasing aromatic precursors. Longer seasoning durations generally produce softer, more complex wood influence, while shorter seasoning yields more aggressive extraction. The stave yard is where raw wood is transformed from a structural material into a nuanced flavor contributor, and seasoning directly affects how a spirit will evolve in the barrel. The cooperage is where construction, toasting, and charring takes place. Cooperage decisions translate wood chemistry into usable flavor pathways. Barrel construction, including stave thickness, joint tightness, and head design, affects oxygen ingress and evaporation rates. Toasting gently degrades hemicellulose and lignin, creating caramelized sugar, vanillin, and spice compounds, while preserving structural integrity. Toasting gently degrades hemicellulose and lignin, creating sugars, vanillin, and spice compounds. Charring introduces a charcoal layer that filters sulfur compounds, accelerates color development, and exposes deep caramelized wood layers. Different toast and char combinations create distinct chemical environments. Light toast emphasizes sweetness and vanilla. Heavy toast drives cocoa and roasted notes, and deep char amplifies smoke and early extraction. Each cooperage choice is effectively a design decision that determines how the spirit will interact with the barrel over time. Cooperage choices become a form of recipe development rather than a fixed input. Heat treatment fundamentally rewrites the wood's chemistry. Toasting breaks down hemicellulose into caramelized sugars and lignin into vanillin precursors and more soluble compounds, which is equal to faster extraction. Charring creates a charcoal layer. It increases surface area and opens the wood structure, which actually results in faster, earlier extraction of color, caramel, smoke, and lactones. Deeper chars 3 and 4, increase permeability and speed up extractions, but can also accelerate tannin pickup. The heat gradient inside of the stave, that's between the char layer, the toasted layer, and the raw wood, creates multiple extraction zones with different speeds. Thinner staves and more aggressive bending and toasting increase permeability. Thinner staves, faster penetration and extraction. Thicker staves, slower penetration, more controlled extraction. Barrel size matters. Smaller barrels dramatically increase the surface area to volume of whiskey or spirit which actually accelerates extraction. Drier wood absorbs spirit faster initially, increasing early extraction. More hydrated wood slows initial penetration but may produce smooth long-term extraction. The more extractives that are present in the wood, the faster the spirit picks them up. High lactone content results in rapid coconut and wood sweetness. High egalitannine content results in rapid structure, grip, and spice. High hemicellulose results in rapid caramel and toast notes after heat treatment. So I'm hoping you can pick up the idea that species, seasoning, growth environment, and cooperage environment, and the way the barrels are managed all influence the extractive load. Tyloses are natural plugs in the woods of the vessels of the American white oak. More tyloses, less liquid flow through the wood, slower deep penetration results in more surface extraction. Fewer tyloses, which are found in European oak and Mizunara, result in deeper penetration, faster extraction of tannins and spice. Fast extraction does not mean fast maturation. Extraction is only part of the cycle. Oxidation, esterification, polymerization, those things all take time. A porous, fast extracting wood can give huge early flavor, but still require long aging for integration and for the flavors to meld together. At a molecular level, lignin breaks down into aromatic aldehydes and phenols that define vanilla, spice, and smoke. Hemicellulose caramelizes into sugars that drive sweetness, mouthfeel. Tannins provide structure, dryness, and oxidative stability. So you get one of those whiskeys that has that real dryness. That's a lot of tannins have been extracted into the product. Oak lactones, which are strong in American oak, produce coconut, sweet wood, and creamy vanilla flavors and aromas. European oak has lower lactone levels, shifting the profile towards spice and dried fruit. The relative proportions and reactivity of these compounds vary by species, meaning that the same toast or char applied to different wood produces entirely different flavor profiles. Practical flavor outcomes can be with American white oak, typical vanilla, caramel, coconut, sweet spice, and fast extraction. European oak, on the other hand, produces dried fruit, clove, nutmeg, sort of a tannic grip or dryness, and oxidative depth. Spanish oak gives you like a rich raisin, fig, walnut, and dark spice aromatic profile, especially seen when seasoned with Oloroso or PX sherry. The chemistry of maturation is very complex, so you can see that all of these things that I've been talking about affects that chemistry. Maturation is driven by a balance of extraction, oxidation, and concentration, all unfolding over time. Alcohol dissolves wood compounds, oxygen slowly enters through the staves, and evaporation concentrates flavors while altering the proof. The processes interact continuously, meaning maturation is a dynamic rather than a linear process. Early aging is often dominated by oak impact, while later stages reveal integration, ester formation, and complexity. Thermal degradation products, which is how it's toasted and charred, the levels, actually convert lignin into vanillin, oak lactones, phenolics, and smoky compounds. Extraction versus oxidation versus concentration. They're the three pillars of maturation, and how they interact over time results in the final spirit. Reaction pathways include esterification, Maillard reactions, and slow oxidative transformations that build complexity during maturation. The spirit-wood interaction, which includes the proof, the pH, the congeners, and entry strength, all influence extraction rates and flavor balance. The warehousing process, including the climate and the environment within the warehouse, is as important as the still distillation process. Temperature cycles, result in seasonal expansion and contraction of the volume of the spirit, which drives the spirit into and out of the wood. Humidity affects the angel's share, the composition, whether it's more water or ethanol loss, and its impact on the proof trajectory. The warehouse design plays a significant role. There's warehouses that are rickhouses versus palletized storage, which affects the airflow, insulation, and microclimates within the warehouses. And in Scotland, the dunnage warehouses, while very low, are usually very high humid areas. Geographic differences also affect it. As I had mentioned, in Kentucky it's hotter, in Scotland it's cooler. There are continental climates, and how each creates a distinct maturation curve due to the microenvironment within the warehouse. The message is basically the warehouse serves as a tool. I know there are certain distilleries like Maker's Mark that actually rotate the casks so that they spend a specific amount of time in each area within a specific warehouse. So moving into cask selection and inventory management. Selecting a cask is a quality decision as much as a flavor one. Distillers must evaluate the fill history, the cooperage origin, and previous contents, while also tracking each barrel's performance over time. Effective inventory management allows distillers to predict maturation trajectories, identify outliers, and intervene before problems arise. Cask management is an ongoing relationship, not a one-time purchase. Some practical sections for working distilleries: new versus used casks, first fill versus refill dynamics, extraction potential, and flavor predictability. Cask defects, leaks, microbial contamination, sulfur issues, and how to diagnose and correct them are critical. Cask procurement strategy, how to evaluate suppliers, cooperages, and secondary market barrels. Inventory management, tracking fill dates, warehouse positions, and sensory checkpoints. Cask selection is a combination of quality control and flavor design. Within this whole wood cask management system is a consideration of the spirit category differences. Different spirits demand different maturation strategies. Different spirits require category-based differences. With bourbon, reliance on new charred oak, and with Scotch whiskey, use of refill and seasoned casks. This explains how tradition, regulation, and climate shaped each approach. Rum, brandy, and agave spirits introduce additional variables, from tropical aging to Solera systems. Understanding these traditions and laws allow distillers to borrow techniques intelligently rather than imitate them blindly. Different traditions use casks differently. Bourbon, new charred oak, high extraction, rapid early maturation. Scotch and world malts typically use refill casks, sherry butts, hogsheads, and rely more on oxidative versus extractive balance. Rum, brandy, tequila, and others are affected by cultural practices that shape cask choice and warehouse strategies. Within this whole warehouse process, one has to consider sensory evaluation and profiling. Sensory analysis is the distiller's feedback loop. Producers must stress structured tasting protocols to track development, identify defects, and determine readiness. Regular sensory checkpoints help distillers recognize when a spirit is improving, plateauing, or declining. Data and chemistry must ultimately be validated by human perception. Sensory work is paramount. Structured sensory panels are used. They're used to evaluate casks consistently. Tracking development, identify when a spirit is peaking, plateauing, or declining. And defect identification. Is there sulfur or excessive tannins drying out the spirit? Is there over oaking or microbial faults? And during this whole maturation process, there are casks that will need repairing. Some of them are leaking, so there's maintenance and troubleshooting activities going on all the time. They have to repair leaks. Sometimes you'll have to rejuvenate casks by shaving out the inside, retoasting them, recharring them, and only when it's worth the effort, because you can only do that so many times. And then there's preventative maintenance, keeping the casks hydrated, rotating them, and monitoring them in the warehouse. And this whole maturation process culminates with blending and final spirit design. Blending is presented as the culmination of cask management, not as a separate discipline. Matt Strickland explains how grouping barrels by profile and maturity allows distillers to build balance and consistency while preserving the character of the spirit. Thoughtful blending turns variability into strength, enabling both brand identity and innovation. In this whole process, they do group the casks, which helps create balance between the different casks. They also look for batch consistency and innovation. Everybody's trying to find their own niche in the market, and so a little innovation is always very helpful and allows you to potentially come up with a product that people are going to want consistently. I hope this has helped you understand the complexity but the value of having an amazing wood program. The wood, the forest, the cooperage, the locations, the warehouses, they all play a huge role in the final product that each distillery is trying to develop. So thanks for joining me on this whiskey deep dive. Next time you get a chance to do a tasting activity, try using the sheet on my blog to develop a consistent process. That consistency is what the distillers use in the warehouses to come up with the same balanced spirit that people love to go and buy and want to know that that spirit's going to be the same one that they always purchase. So whether you're a beginner discovering new flavors or an aficionado pursuing perfection, the journey always has another fascinating glass to offer. Please join me at the Buffalo Distilling Company for a deluxe tour and tasting by signing up on our website to experience a Buffalo-made bourbon firsthand. Until the next podcast, keep sipping, keep exploring, and remember, good whiskey is like a well-crafted story. A special shout out to the Buffalo Distilling Company for the use of their distillery for tours, tastings, and my whiskey workshop. Again, please leave questions or comments on my website at bisonbourbonspiritstc.com. The podcast provides general information and entertainment. Always drink responsibly and consult local regulations before imbibing. This podcast is meant for listeners who are of legal drinking age. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and stay tuned for more deep dives into the world of spirits. Until then, check out my blog, explore the merchandise, and join me for a workshop or tour at the Buffalo Distilling Company. Cheers to bold spirits and curious minds.